Good morning. We are live on the Falcons Podcast. It is a Monday morning, which today on week 14, 15, I'm losing track. That means it is football night, Monday Night Football. The Atlanta Falcons head over to take on the Las Vegas Raiders. The 2-11 Las Vegas Raiders against the 4-game losing streak Atlanta Falcons. Probably not quite the matchup ESPN, ABC had in mind when they scheduled this one. But there are certainly intriguing storylines, especially if the Atlanta Falcons get to play Desmond Ridder, which I think that's kind of what we all want to see, right? Don't we want to see Desmond Ridder playing quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders tonight? I know I do. It would make it a whole lot more interesting for me. Lots of entertaining games this weekend. Not much broke right for the Falcons in the way of results, including the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going out to the Los Angeles and just laying it down on the Chargers in the second half. What was a close game turned into a blowout. Green Bay, I think, is another team to look at that seems to be running away with locking up a wild card spot. So it's kind of South or bust. And once you started losing those games and going from 6-3 from 6-3 to 6-7, it's still South or bust. But we go live every Monday and Wednesday. But I ask of you, make sure you hit that subscribe and or like button if you're on Facebook so you get your notifications, because we change up the schedule every now and then, including this week. So we will go live tomorrow morning. After the game, we'll have our sleep on at night, the aftermath reaction tomorrow morning at 8:35 a.m. And then we probably won't go on Wednesday morning. So make sure you get your alerts. When those, because we do change up the schedule from time to time, because frankly, the schedule changes from time to time. But the reason why I like going live is because I like having the conversation with y'all and seeing what's on your mind and being part of this community. And thank you to our growing Falcons podcast community across all of our channels. It's been super active. Those likes and those shares and those comments all help. Michael Ronquillo's in here first with us today, and I know you're up bright and early out in Tucson, Arizona. Michael, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Actually, just Scott, you got it right. Good morning, Scott on the Falcons podcast. Good morning to you, Michael. Victor, he's here as well. He says, good morning, guys. Very likely win today. But, man, this Bucs W yesterday really screwed us. This is what you get when you depend on others to get to the playoffs. And, I said – last week, after watching how bad the Chargers, and I'm not blaming the Chargers on this. Ladd McConkey's hurt, injuries to the running back. Quentin Johnson looks like he's really, really struggling. He looks like he was a bust for a first-round pick. They just don't have the weapons on offense, and you've got to believe that that's going to be their priority. When the Falcons hold you to under 200 yards, you're in trouble. And the Falcons held them to under 200 yards. And Tampa Bay is playing better than that. So I'm not surprised a bit that Tampa went out and beat the Chargers. And it's a short week. And the Broncos and the Chargers play this week. And we'll preview that one on Wednesday. And then we'll probably have our reaction to that one on Friday morning then too. And Victor follows up. He says, when are we going to start having the conversation about firing Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris? If they miss the playoffs this year, does it start next year? We are on year 5 of Terry Fontenot's tenure, and we didn't crack a positive record yet. So, yeah, he's had 4 drafts. 4 drafts, and I think the draft record is pretty spotty. We can get into it. And one of the things I try to avoid when doing draft grading for myself is hindsight grading, because it's real easy. And it's one of the reasons Falcons podcast fans that I hate the phrase. I just freaking hate the phrase, the best player available. People throw that out there like it's just the God answer to, why did you take Kyle Pitts? Well, he was the best player available. Was he? Are you sure about that? Because if you take Kyle Pitts, I'll take the field for who was the best player out of this. So I'm trying to change that, and I hope it catches on. And if you want to say best prospect available, that's subjective as hell. But when you say best player available, that sounds more objective, or that sounds more subjective. How do we screw those up? That sounds more objective subjective either way. Now I've confused myself. This is one of the reasons I don't like going live. When you say best prospect, it leaves the room for doubt in there. It leaves the room for opinion in there. When you say best player, it sounds like you're saying a fact. And the draft for Terry Fontenot has certainly been pretty spotty through the years. It's like, well, he's gotten this guy and this guy. Guys, when you're drafting top 10 4 years in a row, you should have good players. I mean, that's not the hard part. The harder part is getting down to the day two, and day two is really where he has struggled. The second and third round picks, and then giving up third round picks. You know, when you give up a third and a pretty deep second day two to go up and draft Ruka Rohoro, and this isn't hindsight grading, looking at that saying, you know, what were the team's biggest needs coming into the season? Quarterback, obviously, was number one. We talked wide receiver 2. They filled that very well in free agency. Safety 2 was one of them next to Jesse Bates, and cornerback was the other one. And, you know, when Cooper DeJean is sitting right there, that's not hindsight grading. And you trade a third and a second to go up and get Ruka Rohoro, a spot that you're deep in anyway on the defensive line. And again, my reaction to this, once I looked at it was, and I actually cut it up and played it again, was the draft, his draft this year certainly wasn't for this year. He drafted for 2026, including the quarterback, including the defensive line. He drafted replacements for his 30-something-year-old starters. And I said, that's fine. I understand that. I'm not going to complain about that, but don't blow sunshine up my you-know-what about win now, because it's not a win now strategy. Yes, you got better at the quarterback position, in theory, on paper, with Kirk Cousins, but you didn't try and improve the team anymore to try and win this year. And which is fine. You know, you're hiring a new coach. You've got some runway, but again, why do you spend $50 million guaranteed a year for 2 years on Kirk Cousins? If you want to do that, if you want to build a 2026, save some money and invest it in the rest of your team. But I digress. When do we start having that conversation? Oh, it won't be this year. They miss the playoffs this year. Fontenot's seat's getting a little warmer. Morris will get at least 2 years, and they almost always get 3. If they go through 2025 and aren't winning, and 2026 and you're still not winning, I think it's another clean sweep. That you might start over with a new general manager, a new coach. I mean, I can't imagine being able to sit in a job for Arthur Blank and the Atlanta Falcons from 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, after the 26 for 6 years without a winning record. I think that would do it. General managers typically get a little bit more runway than coaches, though, that's for sure. Bucks, Rays, Bolts, good to see you. Appreciate you being in here. I know you enjoyed that game yesterday. And he asked a question. He says, wonder if the Falcons lose today, does it mean the Bucks clinch playoff spot today? Now, you did say playoffs and not the division. The division wouldn't necessarily be clinched because it'd be a 2-game lead with 3 to play. But, you know, looking at the playoffs, I always forget, who's the other team that's in this? Is it the Rams, or are they going to win the division now? We've got the 2 NFC North teams, but who's the third playoff team right now? It's Commanders. That's who I forget. So, and the Commanders won. That was the team I forgot. The Commanders also won. So they moved to 9-5. So even with a win, you're 2 games behind the 7th spot with 3 to play. So it's not looking great for the old home team right now. So if they lose, would you clinch a playoff spot? I would say probably not. Bucks, Rays, Bolts, because you're still behind the number 7 team Commanders, and you wouldn't have clinched the NFC South yet with a 2-game lead with 3 to play. So no, the Bucks are behind the other wild card teams. So until they clinch the division, they do not clinch a playoff spot right now. So and he says the only way the Falcons make the playoffs now is if the Bucks lose out and the Falcons win out. So I think it would be, you know, again, it's if the Falcons win today, they'd be a game behind because they have the tiebreaker, a game behind with 3 to play. So that still isn't right. That still isn't right. Bucks raise bolts. It's with the tiebreaker. Falcons would be 7-7. The Buccaneers would be 8-6. 3 games to play, 1 game lead because the Falcons have the tiebreaker. It still wouldn't take a win out. So the way it's set up right now, so that's okay. It's there's a lot of math, and the 17 game season always screws me up. But again, I like where I think the Falcons are going to 2 games. We've said that before, I know. But we're getting towards the end of the season where teams that are losing kind of want to keep losing, and they'll start sitting players, and you'll see players kind of sitting out that I've got 2 days left on my contract. My hamstring's hurting a little bit. I'm gonna sit this one out here instead of going out for a 2-11 team. Let me scroll down here just a little bit because I want to make sure I say hello to some folks. John is ready to throw in the towel. He says, "Good morning, Scott. The season is over. Might as well see what we have in Penix, in Michael Penix Jr." So there's a lot of stubbornness that's going on that borders on the illogical with some of this stuff with Michael Penix. I mean, if it's a financial decision, it feels like, you put 90 million guaranteed, and it right now I had been writing 100 million because there's no way that Kirk Cousins isn't on the roster on March 5th. I'm just going to call that the first day of the new league year. It's in that neighborhood, give or take a day, of 2025. If he's on the roster in 4 months, he gets another $10 million guaranteed, which pushes his 90 to 100. At this point, I'm not 100% sure he's going to be on the roster. I'm pretty sure he will be, but if they can find a trade partner and give up, and someone can take some of that salary cap, some of his salary, they get that money in relief, then I think they will try and make that move. I don't necessarily think they'll try to make that move, but the move is possible. So right now it's still 90 guaranteed, and I'm less positive that he'll be on the team in March. But it's like, oh, well, Kirk Cousins is a guy that got us to 6-3. Man, we're not talking about someone with a track record here in Atlanta. This is his first season here too. And, it sounds a little bit like, if you listen to NFL insider Jordan Schultz, some of the players are saying him, he's like, listen, Michael Penix is the best quarterback in the building. And after watching Kirk Cousins struggle mightily for the last month and change, I think some of the Falcons players are ready to see a change too. Probably, especially the younger ones, who work with him all the time. So, see what we have in Penix. I'm ready for that. It was funny, last week I mentioned, the part of you almost kind of wants to see how bad it can get, and there's a part of me that wants to see Ritter succeed. And it's like, oh, this is part of the problem with Atlanta Falcons fans. I'm like, or it's such a bad attitude to have. I'm like, listen, sometimes it's a feeling like when you're being tortured, you just want to be put out of your misery. We need to see change. We know where this is headed. This is headed to Michael Penix. We know that. On a long enough timeline, Penix is going to start for this team. When does that happen? Well, some of us feel if Desmond Ritter goes out there and outplays Kirk Cousins, it could happen next week. Do you want to see that happen? I want to see Michael Penix instead of Kirk Cousins. What's going to facilitate that change? I want to see a new defensive coordinator. I've seen enough of Jimmy Lake. What's going to facilitate that change? Now, in a perfect world, yes, I want Jimmy Lake to turn into the second coming of the 85 defense and Buddy Ryan. I just don't think that's going to happen. I want Kirk Cousins to hit the fountain of youth and become the second coming of Drew Brees. I don't think that's going to happen. That'd be great if it does, but the probability isn't necessarily there. It's much more probable that this decline is going to keep going until you get to Michael Penix on this one. Looks like we have our first super chat coming in, so I appreciate that. Jeebus H. Christmas, he says, no matter what happens, taking 2 quarterbacks was a good decision. We act like you're supposed to know who will be good, but we really don't. 2 shots at fixing the quarterback was worth it. Most important position. I disagree with that, with how it was handled. Just because if you had taken a younger quarterback, that would be different. You needed 2 quarterbacks to come in without a doubt, but you were going with a 36-year-old quarterback with a short window. So it's a little bit different than saying, I drafted Drake May and I already forgot his name up there up in New England, the kid from Tennessee. Was it Joe Milton? Is that the right name? With the howitzer of an arm. That's taking 2 quarterbacks. It's taking Sam Darnold for $7 million, a younger guy who has some upside, who's had some questions, as I'm bridging and taking all of my draft picks for backup players, and then drafting J.J. McCarthy. Nobody, and I mean nobody, has done it this way. And there's a reason why. You're trying to reinvent the wheel by saying we're gonna go spend all this salary cap money on a 36-year-old, but then we're also going to build for the future. It doesn't work. The salary cap, the player limitations, as far as the 53-man roster, you just can't do that. It doesn't work that way. There's too many restrictions, competitive balance restrictions, that allow you to store up resources in order to backload your roster. It just doesn't work that way. Basically, every player on your 53, you need to contribute. And when you're taking guys in the second round, especially if you're drafting up a third, and you already have holes on your roster, and he's inactive for the first 4 or 5 weeks, and that's Rook. I'm talking about Rook Oroboro. I'm not even talking about Michael Penix Jr. So, JHC, my number one from the beginning was always to get a veteran on a cheaper bridge type contract. I like Russell Wilson. I like the idea of Justin Fields, and draft a rookie. And you could play your rookie as well. Yes, you needed 2 quarterbacks. Ritter and Heineke were gone. They were going to be moved. You needed 2 quarterbacks in here. I think it was, we've talked about this. It's just, if you wanted to get a rookie, there was no reason to spend $50 million on Kirk Cousins. It was not going to work. It takes away too many resources from too many other holes on your team that you're not able to fill because of the salary cap and limited amount of draft picks. Evan J., good to see you. Thank you so much for the super chat. He says, not to sound too cynical, but don't think people should be that excited for Penix. He was overdrafted on a college football team with a ton of NFL talent that made him look better. We haven't seen him against a real defense. Sorry, my nose is itching this morning, y'all. And that's Evan, that's cynical. It's realistic to think that, hey, he might not be the answer. That's okay. It's incredible to me how high up on a pedestal that Michael Penix has been placed from draft day when nothing has really changed. I mentioned when I threw out that Maxx Crosby is out this week. He's out for the rest of the season. He's hurt. But when I mentioned that, we know that the Raiders were interested in Michael Penix. And we know that Kirk Cousins was playing well. This fell off a cliff, and this goes back to why people said, no, you do not trade your quarterback, your potential franchise quarterback. On draft day, if the Falcons had called up the Raiders and said, hey, we want to send you number 8 for Maxx Crosby straight up, and you can get Penix and Brock Bowers now with I think he was drafted 13th. You can have 8 and 13. You'll have 13, and we want Maxx Crosby. They would have told you to jump in a lake. They would have said, no freaking way. It's 2 first-round draft picks to even start the conversation for Maxx Crosby. If they had made that trade on draft day, everybody here would have said that is amazing. 26-year-old all-pro edge rusher. They got him for the number 8 pick. They just robbed. Not knowing the Atlanta Falcons, telling everybody, this is why we did this. We have to have the quarterback. This is the only chance we'll ever get to have a quarterback. And all of a sudden, Michael Penix was untouchable when he hasn't done anything but throw 15 balls in preseason. So that's perception and that's bias, and that's okay. That's how you can be biased without anything else changing factually. But Penix is now untouchable right now. And now with Kirk Cousins, I'm in that camp too. As bad as Kirk Cousins, I'm ready to start Michael Penix right now. With the quarterbacks that are coming up in this draft, I'm thinking, that I had no problem with the Michael Penix pick. I had the trouble with the combination of Cousins and Penix. Now that I'm off Cousins, I'm all in on Michael Penix too. I'm ready to be done, and let's get out from under that contract as soon as you can, and let's start the Michael Penix era. Let's see what you got. He's 24 years old. He's not a 20-year-old rookie. This isn't Anthony Richardson we're talking about, who played one season in college. This is more like Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. By the way, both of those guys are 9-5. Oh, you got to sit a guy for a year. No, you don't. No, you don't. Especially one that has 50 college starts. He's 24 years old. He's mature. JHC coming back in. He says, we were wrong to have playoffs hope with two first-time players. Also, is Kirk hurt? And there's a lot of talk about that with Kirk Cousins. And it was I think he was on the injury list with a shoulder. I mean, he took off running in the last game. Looks like he's running fine. Is he gun shy? Maybe a little bit, where that should change now. After you take off on a sprint and pick up a first down, all of a sudden you're like, hey, I can do this. I can do this. But the one that gets me has nothing to do with hurt or not hurt. It's the double clutches. If you see him, double clutch and scan downfield, you're like, you can just start chanting together. Don't throw it. Don't throw it. Don't throw it. Don't throw it. God, he threw it right to a defender. That's rookie stuff, man. That's not injury related, or, my Achilles is hurt. That is a mental block that should not be happening with your 36-year-old quarterback. So my biggest concern when I see Kirk Cousins back there is if he double clutches and then throws the ball downfield. If he double clutches, I want to check down, or I want it thrown over the receiver's head into the stands. I'd rather have an intentional grounding, which is basically just a sack, than what we've been seeing with these interceptions. So, but we were wrong to have playoff hopes with two first-time play callers. Part of that, you're hoping the 36-year-old veteran quarterback helped with the Zach Robinson being a first-time play caller. That has gone completely wrong the last 6 weeks. And then Jimmy Lake's been an unmitigated disaster as far as the defensive side of the ball. But when you're thinking about that one, you're like, well, Raheem Morris can take over at any given moment. He is a defensive coordinator. He can call the defense. So if push comes to shove, you're hoping that helps balance out the problem there. Otherwise, you would have gone and gotten, one of those consultants that's been around. I think Norv Turner just got hired again to be a consultant. I don't remember where. But you go and you get a consultant. Hey, Coach Peace, what are you doing down here? You want to come back in Atlanta and help us out a little bit? But you don't need that. You got Raheem Morris on staff. And now the comments that will follow this is like, well, Raheem Morris isn't that good either. That's a discussion that we can have for sure. And appreciate the super chat coming in here, JHC. So let me get back to some of the chat here. Canadian Falcon, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Nick is probably still driving. He was taking 4 days to drive from Seattle to Iowa. Good to see that. Dave, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Brad Clark, good to see you. Michael, he's here from Ocala. Gorgeous country. Some of my favorite place in Florida is Ocala. Horse country. I love it. I try and drive through there when I'm coming up to 75 because it's just prettier to go through Ocala. Good to see you. Edward Brown says, good morning, Scott. Weren't we in the same situation, same time last year? It was a little bit different. As far as, the Falcons never got up to a 3-game, a 6-3, 3 games on the positive side of 500. But to a certain extent, why can't I find the roster. I don't want the draft picks. I want Atlanta. I want to look up the 2023 seasons. Falcons reference. I'm on the reference page all the time. The 2023 season, they were always like within one game. I don't even think they got up 2 games over 500. They went to 4-3. This was a turning point. This is where we're starting to get excited about things, right? You start off 2-0, then you lose at Detroit, and you lose your game in London at Jacksonville. Okay, Detroit, those were both playoff teams. Detroit was starting to become who they are right now, which is, an NFC favorite. Okay, I can live with that one. You lose at Jacksonville. Jacksonville was pretty good last year. And then you come home and you beat a Texans team that is starting to show promise. You're like, okay, I see this. That was a good win. The Houston Texans were a good team last year. Then you lose at home again to the Washington Commanders. What is it with the Falcons and the Commanders? They cannot beat them. I swear they've lost 3 games in a row to 3 losing season Commanders teams. So this is obviously the time they beat them. The Commanders are 9-5, so they got to beat them this year. But then you go down and you take the division lead on October 22nd at Tampa Bay, and you're 4-3. So you're 4-3 right there. And you're thinking, this is all good. The team has finally turned the corner. This is what we're looking to see. You're going to Tennessee and playing Will Levis in his first start, and he ends up in the Hall of Fame because of that start. The Minnesota Vikings, who weren't very good last year, are coming to town, and they don't have a quarterback. They're starting a guy making his first start ever, and he gets knocked out, and then Josh Dobbs shows up. You lose that one. And then you go to Arizona with Kyler Murray making his first appearance on the season after coming back from his knee injury. He hasn't played yet, so he's making his first appearance. 3 consecutive weeks, you were playing quarterbacks making their first throw of the season. Not to mention, you open the season with Carolina Panthers with a quarterback making his first appearance of the season. And then you play the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love making his second start as a player. So it was a quarterbacks last year. And when you lost that game at Arizona at 4-6, the season was over. They should have. Arthur Smith was fired that day. It just took a little while for the rest of the season to run out. So a little bit different. This is honestly right now the way it's trending. This is a bigger collapse. 6-3 with your quarterback. 4 years into the Terry Fontenot rebuilding of this team. Plenty of money, plenty of top 10 draft picks across the roster. If they miss the playoffs this year after being 6-3, this is a bigger collapse than last year. Keith and Ellen Johnson coming in with some stars. It is good to see you. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you doing that. He says, good morning, Scott. Ritter will probably have the game of his life. Sorry, I wanted to grab a quick slug of my Lion coffee. I want to see Ritter. And Ritter wants to see these Falcons. Every time you bring up a stat about this defense, especially the passing defense, it's bad. It's not just bad. It's like eye-popping bad. Wrote up the preview today and the predictions over on Atlanta Falcons on SI and the ESPN predictions. And Eric Moody, the fantasy football analyst, always puts in a little nugget for each game. And he says, look at the other wide receiver. I think it was Jacoby Myers, not Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers could be in for a huge game. The Falcons have given up the second most points to receivers, fantasy points to receivers. You're like, of course they have. Of course they have. It's a 72% completion percentage against. It's 105.5 passer rating. 105.5 would, if that was a person, would be 5th in the NFL. So we're playing the 5th best quarterback in the NFL every week. Nobody else is doing that. We're playing the number 5 quarterback in the NFL every single week. That's what it ends up amounting to. So this Raiders team isn't very good. They play hard for Antonio Pierce. Now they've lost Maxx Crosby, who is, by far they're not just their best player on defense, probably their best player, period. That's not a hot take. This is one of the 3 best edges in the league in an all-pro at a premium position. Brock Bowers is really good, but Maxx Crosby is different. I mean, he's He's maybe a shade below TJ Watt. And I think he's 6 years younger. This is a big, big loss for them. So thank you for this, the stars over there on Facebook. And yeah, is anybody in here going to be surprised if Ritter has arguably his best statistical game? Anybody? Anybody at all? Anybody? I wouldn't think so. KVN G Red. Kevin, good to see you, Kevin G Red. Scott, good morning. Good morning. Right back at you. And Maurice says, Tampa Bay looks like a playoff team. And they did last year too. Going back to last season, after losing that game to the Falcons, they won. They lost to the Falcons, and they hit a poor spot, but they went on the road to Buffalo and on the road to Houston. Okay, those are tough games, but then they beat Tennessee at home, at San Francisco, and at Indianapolis. So they lost 4 out of 5 games, and 4 of those 5 games were on the road, and 3 of those 4 made the playoffs, and Indianapolis was a quarter away from making the playoffs. And then they come home, they beat Carolina, they win in Atlanta, they win at Green Bay, they beat the Jaguars, they lose to the Saints, and then they beat the Panthers to finish 9-8, and then they drubbed the Eagles. Their schedule lightened up a little bit, but then they kept going and they turned around. They played better at the end of the season. That's what Tampa did last year. That's what they're doing this year too. Interesting, huh? Seeing a team, what's that like anyway? Seeing a team improve as the season goes on. Do you know, have you ever experienced that? It's got to be a great feeling. 2016 Falcons. They did it. They really did it. They did it in a big way. So good to see you, Maurice. And let me see here. Steven is here also. He says another regime under this owner. It's been owner a long time, 6 or 7 years. The Dimitroff, Mike Smith to Dan Quinn, Matt Ryan era was good. It was good. You got to hit on your quarterback. Being able to do that matters. So if you start the clock on Michael Penix and he turns out to be good, everything else will kind of follow. And to a certain extent, I think Terry Fontenot's Terry Fontenot is tied to the success of Michael Penix Jr. And if Michael Penix Jr. ends up being the guy that they think he is, then Terry Fontenot will be fine. Raheem Morris, maybe not as much, because the defense could torpedo you the way this defense is playing. It's not just the pass rush. I mean, obviously, you got 9 sacks in the last 2 games, and you gave up 40-something in one of those with the busted coverages on the back end of the zone defense when you got guys spinning in circles like they're about to hit a piñata. One of the comments I saw, and I apologize, it was on the YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel. One of the comments on there was, it looked like the WKRP, and he's trying to dodge turkeys at the WKRP in Cincinnati turkey drop. If you don't know what that means, look it up. It's pretty funny. All my life, I thought turkeys could fly. Jay Gribben, fellow Pope Greyhound, good to see you. He says, good morning, Scott. How much longer do you think we stick with Cousins if he continues to play like he's playing? I mean, if you go to Las Vegas, I mean, I feel like tonight has to be the night, Jay. You just feel like it. And then his former teammate Kyle Rudolph said it won't happen until they get knocked out, and if they lose to the Raiders and the Giants, then they're knocked out. Then you'll see Penix after that. I just think if you lose to the Raiders and you drop 5 in a row, the 5th one to a 2-11 team, to the quarterback you kicked to the curb, who you blamed, you credited to helping to get your job because the quarterback play was so bad, and you go and lose that game on national TV, man, you better make a change. You have to. So you're hoping, Jay, Falcons fans, that you don't find out. You're hoping that the defense that the Raiders are going to put out there isn't very good. Kirk Cousins gets right. Drake London goes back out west, has a big game in Vegas. Bijan Robinson is good. He's been tearing people up. You put the ball in the end zone. Younghoe Koo converts. Your bend but don't break doesn't break because the Raiders are going to have trouble sustaining drives. They'll get some yards, but I think they'll have trouble sustaining scoring drives. And you win. You win comfortably. 14, 17 points, somewhere in there, and you don't have to find out. But if they screw around and lose this game in Las Vegas, there isn't going to be enough cover for Raheem Morris if he throws Kirk Cousins back out there. And Cousins is one of the reasons why. Now, if Cousins goes out there and throws 5 touchdowns and they lose 38-35, well, I've already moved on from Jimmy Lake as far as personnel for next season. I have a hard time seeing Jimmy Lake return as a defensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. And Sam, good to see you. He says, close out the chat and hit the like. Yeah, hit the like button. That's a very good message. Mark Schrader is here as well, and he's usually come with some stars too. Good to see you, Mark. Hope you are doing well. And Dave follows up. He said, if the Raiders win tonight, the Falcons will be given the throne to the biggest laughing stock of the NFL. Maybe. I don't think enough people care about the Falcons to ever be the biggest laughing stock of the NFL. Atlanta's a big market, but we're not a big market team. NFC South, none of us really are down here in the South. The Saints, the Panthers, the Buccaneers, the Falcons, we're on the bottom half of market size when you compare us to the Blue Bloods, like the Chicago Bears, the Giants, the Packers. Even the Packers, as small as they are, they have a national following. The Steelers, the Cowboys, even the Commanders, the Eagles. We're nowhere near on those teams. No, they don't care enough. So I think the Bears have had that. The last few seasons, more people are paying attention to Chicago. But it would certainly be, if they lose to the Desmond Ridder-led Raiders tonight, it would be point and laugh. And what are you going to do? You're going to take it. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's unbelievable. And the unbelievable, like I said, I worship at the altar of Murphy's Law when it comes to this type of stuff. What's the worst that could happen? Prepare for that. I have earned the right to be a cynic when it comes to this. Rio came in with some Facebook stars, and let me see if I can find them over here. And Jay brings up another point too. He says, we only have 4 draft picks next year. Oh, no, that's not good. That Red Sleeve Dune turned out to be a bust. Yeah, that was a 3rd rounder. You lost a 5th rounder for tampering. It wasn't just Kirk Cousins. It was all the 3 guys you signed for, officially. And I don't know if this is, if this is all that happened or not. I don't have that information. Vikings fans will go to the grave saying that it was 10 times worse than this. But officially, they lost a 5th round draft pick for trying to arrange travel arrangements for their 3 free agents before they were allowed to. And they lost a 5th round pick for that. And Robin says, Kirk is washed but not hurt. It's just strange, Robin, watching, how does a guy over the course of just a few weeks go from throwing, 500 yards and 4 touchdowns to what we've seen the last couple of weeks? The drop-off just doesn't happen week to week. He was playing some pretty good ball the first 6 weeks. And yeah, he beat up on some bad, Buccaneers defenses, some depleted Tampa Bay Buccaneers defenses. But he's played some defenses that you can exploit. What's the New Orleans Saints excuse? Everybody's lit up the Saints except Kirk Cousins. And you can be washed and still not play this bad, So do I think he's hurt? There might be something there. Do I think he's hurt enough to play this poorly? No. Do I think he is washed up enough to play this poorly? No. Might there be a little bit of a combination? I think it's in his head as much as anything. And again, the double clutches just kill me. I posted it a couple weeks ago. If he double clutches and throws the ball downfield, it's just bad for sure. And as Keith says, it ended up being a 2-year, $90 million guaranteed deal, basically, where you have financial flexibility after year 2, unless you're able to pull off a trade. 2-year, $100 million for Kirk Cousins, $35 million dead cap hit after 2025. Looks like you're stuck with Kirk Cousins for at least 1 more year, unless you can find someone that wants to pick up $20 million of salary, which isn't that much, to be honest with you. If someone wants to pick up some money And that might be part of it. That's the other conspiracy theory. The reason why they're playing him is they hope they don't want to set him down right now while he's playing this poorly. They want him to finish strong so he can up his trade value in the offseason, because I don't want to see Kirk Cousins as quarterback of this team next year. For sure. That's where my thought process is. Let me see here. Rio, I found you here. He says, winning out might not be enough. I'm resigned to a 10-7 team that doesn't make the playoffs. I'll be okay with that. Should that be the case? If they go 10-7 and miss the playoffs, and they win the next, because they're not just behind Tampa right now. They're behind the Cardinals at 7-7. They're behind the Seahawks at 8-6. And they're, even with a win, they're 2 games behind the number 7 Commanders. If they go 10-7 and finish with wins over the Raiders and Giants, Commanders and Panthers, golly, if they don't go at least 9-8, if they don't go at least 9-8, there's heads. Again, I think there's going to be some heads rolling anyway. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be okay with that. 10-7 is like, that's where it should be. And if I'd be okay with 10-7, but I would still look at making some changes. Absolutely. Hopefully, best case, in my opinion, for the Falcons, they go 10-7, Kirk Cousins plays well, and they find a trade partner. And then they hire a new defensive coordinator to come in that's going to play something other than a prevent defense. That's my offseason goals right now. Kirk Cousins plays great. You're able to move off of him and get some salary cap relief and maybe a draft pick or 2 back. And you are you end up changing the defensive coordinator. So Rio, there's still a lot to play for here over the last month. Jonathan, he says he's a Spurs fan, Tottenham fan here. Scott, you enjoyed yesterday then. The Spurs and Chelsea were playing at the same time. And while Chelsea was playing their bogey team at home, Spurs are racking up the scoreboard like a pinball machine. So I know you enjoyed that game. Let me see here. Dwayne C. said teams can run on the Falcons. That will help Ritter's confidence. Teams have been able to do pretty much whatever they want to on the Falcons. Again, Dwayne, because the base defense, and this isn't an exaggeration. Now, it's changed. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot more straight 3-4 instead of that 2-4-5 nickel with only 2 defensive linemen, 2 edge stand-up outside linebackers, 2 inside linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. Nobody on earth runs that outside of if you're playing Houston and the run and shoot in college. So that's changed a little bit, but when you've only got 2 defensive linemen, you got these huge wide splits, you can run an aircraft carrier through the Falcons line because there's so much space. That changed. That's changed. Watch when they come out on first downs. What's the base package? I've seen 3 defensive linemen out there, 2 edges. So a more realistic 3-4, which is what we should see from this team with the depth they have at the defensive line. That's automatic. You'd think. Dwayne, and he says, Dwayne says, since stats are for losers here, what will Raheem be reviewing this offseason? Stats are for losers. Yeah, well, we'll see. And again, stats can back up your eye test, and your eye test is you're giving up too many. You're not getting the other team off the field, and now you're giving up the big plays. I'm not converting in the red zone. I'm not scoring points. I'm not putting up touchdowns. I mean, the stats will back that up. What your eye test, I used to call it seat of the pants analytics. What is your gut telling you? And then you can go and look up numbers and say, see, I was right about this. The defense has to change, and there needs to be some serious investment in the defense. If I'm looking at the offense, I'm okay. Yeah, would I like to possibly add what? Another wide receiver, a tight end? What do I need? Another tight end? Maybe. But the offense is fairly well set when it comes to personnel. There's no gaping holes over there other than the quarterback play on the offensive side of the ball. And you've got your answer already on your roster. Man, that's a luxury that most people don't have. So you feel pretty good about that. Now I can use what draft picks I do have, what salary cap room I do have, to shore up the defense. And by God, I've got to get somebody that's going to turn these guys loose. I cannot play a passive prevent defense. It just sucks the life out of a team. So let me see here. I want to get a couple more comments, and then we'll talk predictions, and we're going to get out of here. Troy says, almost missed you. How is everyone? Good to see you, Troy. Glad you were able to make it. Jimmy says, as far as at the very beginning, I talked about the matchup. He says, ain't nobody watching ESPN tonight. I will, but it's on ESPN, right? Honestly, I don't know anymore. I don't turn to a channel. I flip on like YouTube TV and it tells me where the game is anymore or what app I have to put on. So it's I think Monday night games are on ESPN because that's where the Manning cast is, right? Something like that. Bond saying, when I wake up and think we go live every Monday and Wednesday at 8:35 p.m. says, get out of my head, Scott Kennedy, trying not to lose my mind. Imagining us not making playoffs. Another effing heartbreaking season. Yeah, it's my go-to GIF for the Atlanta Falcons is Lucy with the football and Charlie Brown. I mean, every time you think that, the hope builds and then there it goes. One of these days, right? It's like, it's only been 60 something years that they haven't won. Where are we on 60? Is this 60 coming up? 58 years is 60, 2026. Was it 1966 when the franchise started? So that's almost 60 years coming up. Like I said, whenever I really bristle when anybody says Atlanta Falcons fans are bad. that one will get me. Atlanta Falcons fans are terrible fans. Dude, if you find an Atlanta Falcons fan, shake his hand. You don't get much more loyal than this. This is an abusive relationship that Atlanta Falcons have put through. They have been on the wrong end of some beatings. That's why I say, you want to trash talk a Falcons fan? What are you going to do? What are you going to do to us? What are you going to do to a Falcons fan that hasn't been done worse by their own franchise? Just doesn't happen. And B-Side Rap Reviews comes in. Good to see you, B-Side. He says, Raheem's defenses weren't particularly great in LA. They were awful at run defense. They just had Aaron Donald as a get out of jail free card. Yeah, that's nice. that's nice to have. There isn't that guy on the Falcons front end, obviously. Grady Jarrett's good, but Aaron Donald's arguably the best to ever do it. Y'all know I'm a huge Grady Jarrett fan. That's nothing against Grady, but Aaron Donald's different. And then when you've got Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons and AJ Terrell, and you play so passive on the back end, that just drives me freaking crazy. It really does. Press these receivers, put some pressure on them, get out of the prevent. It's just maddening. It is. And, I posted, Fontenot hasn't taken a cornerback with a top 100 pick in his 4 years. And in this binary world that we live in, people always want to blame one thing. Defensive backs are fine, if not for the pass rush. If the scheme were better, that would fix everything. No, it's a combination of things. Here's what I do know. If I want to play a base nickel, whether it's a 3-4 base nickel or not, that's fine. It wouldn't be a 3-4, it'd be a 3-3-5. Base nickel. They didn't sign Justin Simmons until DeMarco Hellams went out. DeMarco Hellams was fine as a rookie. He was okay, but he wasn't, I'm going to pencil this guy in as my starter. I think personally, going into the season with AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates, DeMarco Hellams, Mike Hughes, and D. Alford with Clark Phillips as your number one, and you play 6 at a time. That's what a dime package is. As my defensive backs was naive. It's like, well, we've got some of the best defensive backs in AJ, Justin, and Jesse. Yeah, you do. I'm a big fan of all those guys. That leaves holes that weren't addressed in the offseason. That absolutely leaves holes. We talk about it on the offensive line the most. You're only as strong as your weakest link, because if one guy's getting blown up, the defensive lineman that blows up your guard is going to wreck the play. It's kind of similar on the backside as well. If I've got 2 holes in a nickel defense, well, I only have one football. I've only got one guy to throw it to. So the defense, there are some personnel matters here that, again, I thought should have been addressed in the offseason and weren't. I thought Justin Simmons helped. But looking at this, Matt Judon's a bust and Justin Simmons is a bust. I'll say it. I've said it before and I'll say it again. About the only player that might be playing better this year than last year, and he was pretty damn good last year, is Caden Ellis. That's it. And if everybody is playing worse, that's the scheme, y'all. That's the scheme on this. Jeff says it is on ESPN. Thank you. We got switched to ESPN. Was it on ABC? Do they even carry them anymore? I don't honestly, I don't know on that stuff. Jimmy's talking about a game. He says, as far as we're not talking about what Jimmy says. That game will not be mentioned. Jeff, you're about my age. He says 100% abusive relationship since 78. The first season I remember watching Falcons football, I think it was 1980. And I think that was Lehman Bennett, William Andrews, Steve Barkowski. And the Falcons blew a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter against the Dallas Cowboys after a 12-4 season in the first round of the playoffs. Little did I know that was going to be a lifetime choice at that point. So we'll see. The Falcons are up to almost a 6-point favorite. So again, looking at the score, I think I put it down as 27-20 was the score that I picked. And frankly, the Raiders shouldn't score 20, but when you've got busted coverages and turnovers galore, you put up some points. Take care of the ball. Don't get stupid on defense. And you should be able to hold these guys to the teens. Brock Bowers will get his. Brock Bowers will probably go for 120 to 140 yards. Okay. Make somebody else beat you. I'm okay with that. The running game isn't that great. Desmond Ridder isn't very good under pressure. Aidan O'Connell is okay when he's healthy, and he's not. This defense is giving up is 31st in points allowed, the Raiders defense. So they're awful in the red zone because as far as total yards, they're not awful. They're not bottom 5, bottom 6 on passing total yards or rushing. They're like lower teens. So they're bad, but then they're giving up an awful amount of points. They're 2-11 for a reason. Go win this damn game. Go win this game. My prediction for this was 27-20 Falcons. Kirk Cousins, it's time to stat pad a little bit. 3 touchdowns, breaks the funk, 3 touchdowns today. Drake London goes for over 100 yards. Bijan Robinson goes for over 100 yards, and people say Kyle Pitts is where. And this is a time where Brock Bowers and Kyle Pitts get matched up as far as, okay, the 2 highest drafted tight ends in a while. This is where they're going. One's going up and one's going down. So I think that ends up being one of the storylines tonight too. But I do like the Falcons on this one. And Derek says with no Maxx Crosby tonight, don't have to worry about him single-handedly wrecking the game. I posted on Facebook, Derek, when I posted the story that he was out, that big sigh of relief that you just heard. That was Caleb McGarry. That was Caleb McGarry at right tackle saying, thank God. And that's not a shot at Caleb McGarry. Maxx Crosby is just that good. He is. He's just that good. Mr. Alijo, he says, I hope Ridder tosses for 600 yards and 10 touchdowns on us. And again, and this is where people say, Falcons fans are bad, for even saying something like this. Again, I kind of explained that to a certain extent at the beginning. When you can see an outcome, dude, just put me out of my misery. I know where this is going. I don't need this to be strung along. It's headed towards Michael Penix. It's headed towards Jimmy Lake getting fired. Let's just speed up the process. I get it. I do. I do. I get that. Terry Clark, good to see you, Terry. He says, Falcons to Falcon tonight on national TV. Not feeling so good about the way things are going. Again, winning helps cure all. Falcons are winning this next 2. They are. The Falcons are winning the next 2. As far as, they can't lose to the Raiders and to the Giants at home. They're just not gonna, knock on wood. But we'll be back tomorrow to talk about it. And since there is no Broncos for breakfast, before I get out of here, I'm going to take this question from Denver Luke because Nick is out and I'm not doing Broncos by myself today. We'll be back on Wednesday for Broncos. We'll be back tomorrow, so make sure you hit the like and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow to react to this game. And hopefully we're saying, all right, It's a step forward. Kirk Cousins looked much better. The defense looked much more aggressive. They weren't giving up yards by the bushels. Younghoe Koo made all his kicks. That's what we're hoping for on this. But any quick thoughts on Denver's game yesterday? Yes. Sean Payton made a deal with the devil. Sean Payton is one of those guys that is super arrogant that if he's not on your team, you hate because he's good. He's arrogant and he backs it up, and he's got his team believing. Bo Nix throws 3 interceptions, and the defense and the special teams are good enough to win against a flawed team. The Indianapolis Colts are a flawed team. Their defense hasn't been that great, and their quarterback is erratic as hell. They've got 3 phases of the game where any one of those can win the game. If one breaks down, they can beat you in the other 2. They were going to beat the Indianapolis Colts because the Indianapolis Colts aren't good enough to not be good in all 3 phases and win. They're not good enough. They're way too flawed at the quarterback position, and their defense can't bail you out. And I don't know as much about their special teams. Denver can be good on any given day in all 3 phases of the game. They weren't good on offense yesterday. That's okay. Their defense and their special teams took over. Marvin Mims returns it to plus yardage, and you get a score and you go ahead. And then you put the squeeze on them. We talk about the Atlanta Falcons, y'all, when we start talking about the Falcons were bottom 3 in yards per drive, time of possession per drive, points per drive, and plays per drive. All 4 of those things, their defense going against them. They were bottom 3 in all 4 of those. So that meant the other team was either scoring, which they were at 56% of the time, or they were moving the ball down and pinning the Falcons in. In 8 drives yesterday, the Denver Broncos had an average starting field position of the Colts' 47-yard line. You know how easy it is to play offense and win games when I'm in your territory 8 times to start? Come on, man. That's like college football overtime rules. Those are my thoughts on that. Denver Broncos are legit. Their defense is so much better than I ever thought they were going to be this year. And their offense is coming around to where you want it to be. Had an off game yesterday. They still need more weapons on offense. That's okay. You're taking an $80 million dead cap hit. You can't fix all your problems while doing that. They will address some offensive playmakers, running back, wide receiver, tight end, probably 2 running backs, at least 1 receiver and a tight end in the offseason, and then try and backfill and keep building on that defense. On that note, I'm going to get out of here. So we got a little bit of Broncos for breakfast for y'all. Appreciate you coming in. I saw Keith and Rio on the stars. I will come back if someone else did and say thank you and shout y'all out on the next show. It's a little harder for me to do this and see them on Facebook when I'm by myself. But JHC and Evan J coming in with super chats helps keep the lights on, helps keep this forehead nice and shiny for y'all. Get your Lion coffee. Our partnership is expired for now, but hopefully they'll be back. And either way, like I said, I'm a Lion coffee customer, whether they're our partners on that day or not. Get your Lion coffee. We will see you tomorrow. Enjoy the game tonight, y'all. It should be you're hoping for a good Falcons performance. As much as we doom and gloom, you want your team to win. Let's go out there, show them what you're capable of, put some pressure on the Buccaneers, and we'll see y'all tomorrow morning. Y'all have a great Monday.